When we see through this delusion that a soulmate will complete me, a bigger house in a better neighborhood will complete me, shopping in the topmost stores in New York will complete me, we still come back home and we're empty. When we are in that space where no matter what we accumulate and what we possess leaves us bereft and empty at an emotional, spiritual level, then begins the real journey to look for something wholesome within, and we find it everywhere.
Welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. We're here to facilitate inspiring dialogues about the nature of consciousness across disciplines, communities, and practitioners, all with a holistic perspective.
From energy healing to somatic therapies, from neuroscience to meditation, we believe the most interesting things happen at the boundaries of disciplines.
I'm Christabel.
And I'm Keith.
Thanks for joining us today and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Field Dynamics podcast. Today we are joined by guest Acharya Shunya. Shunya facilitates authenticity, self-remembrance, and divine feminine pathways to awakening. As the first female head of her spiritual lineage that traces its roots to 2,000 years ago in India, she represents the ancient Vedic tradition of India in a way that is completely authentic, yet as relevant as possible to modern sensibilities and needs. She is the author of 3 best-selling books, Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom, Sovereign Self, and her newest book, Raw Like a Goddess, Every Woman's Guide to Becoming Unapologetically Powerful, Prosperous, and Peaceful. Shunya reinterprets and recontextualizes ancient Vedic wisdom and Dharma teachings of Advaita Vedanta, Ayurveda, and yoga to create a learning and awakening path for contemporary seekers. She has over 20 years' experience as a spiritual, wellness, relationship, and women's empowerment coach and group facilitator. She is also the founder of the Awaken Self Foundation, a learning platform headquartered in Northern California. Firstly, Shunya, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to going where this is meant to go with you.
Absolutely, where the conversation takes us. You have something of an unusual background, and I wonder if you could kindly share with us some of the context of your family, of your Baba, your paternal grandfather, who was also your guru, and the Vedic lineage that you represent.
My grandfather, Baba Ayodhyanath, was a legendary teacher of the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita in India. And so was his father. My father is also a scholar. And it was decided when I was in my early 20s that I would be the next leader of our lineage that goes back several more generations in India, in northern India. I grew up in a typical family with a lot of love and guidance and even scolding at times, but these were not ordinary people. And clearly I didn't have an ordinary destiny. And through the ups and downs of life, what I found was that conversations I had with Baba were really preparation for the life I was meant to lead, for the darkness I had to combat with my inner light, and for the work I had to do to uplift consciousness in the world I inhabit. So clearly the coming together of Baba and Shunya, our grandfather and granddaughter, was something special. At least I feel that.
Your name, chosen by your grandfather, that being Shunya, relates to, as I understand, the mathematical idea of zero or void or infinity. So speaking of destiny, as you were describing, could you tell us a little bit about the nature of your name, these related words, and how that might, I don't know, enlighten us to some kind of a destiny or a spiritual understanding of such?
Ultimate reality in non-dual teachings of the Upanishads has many names. though it is really one truth, one consciousness. And there are some typical names. One is Purnam, which means fullness, radical fullness. You can take away everything from it, but it remains full. That's why it's full. And then there is radical emptiness, which is Shunyata. And we are two sisters, my sister and I. And my elder sister was named Purna when she was spiritually ordained, and I was named Shunya. These are our spiritual names. We go through a fire ceremony and choose a lifetime of study and inner growth and giving back to our society from this inwardly elevated awareness and consciousness. So to be given the name Shunya, I have a funny anecdote because when I was a child, I only knew it meant zero. And all the kids would tease me at school. And I thought, how can Baba do this to me, this act of supreme cruelty, to give me this name and to be considered a zero? And if I didn't do well at school or I fell down or something, people would say, but after all, she's a zero. And then when you achieve something and your ego makes all this struggle to arrive or establish itself, begins that great unwinding to become a zero by choice. So either I'm running away from the zero or I'm trying to be it. But either way, this name is an interesting drama for my life.
To share a quote from Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom, and that is, hopelessness is the disease that precedes all symptoms. And I wonder if you could talk to this a little in terms of what inspired you to write that particular book and what lessons or learnings you're hoping readers may take away.
No matter how difficult our life circumstances are, hope, which is connected with an entitlement to lead a life of happiness, peace, serenity, comfort, comes from our connection with the divine. It's almost like each one of us feels betrayed if we don't have that life, because we are made with that same stardust. We come from that same cosmos. That divine orchestration has manifested us. And when we lead desperate lives, unhappy lives, broken lives, and ultimately hopeless lives, we're pretty alienated from that inheritance, from that endowment of spirit well-being within. And I have found that as long as there is hope, there remains a connection with Atma, or our self within. And that connection, that hope leads us to our teacher, leads us to life-changing podcasts like this one. It leads us to open books that may provide us a solution. But when there is no hope, we succumb to the ego and to its gossip and to the material dream, which is really a nightmare. So I found in working with Ayurveda, which is one of the gifts from Baba amongst the many gifts he gave me, including yoga philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, that no matter how sick people were, they even had terminal prognosis. But if they truly felt hopeful and deserving to get better, with a little bit of assistance from Ayurveda, they would get better. And that, I think, is something for us to pay attention to. Like, what voices are we listening to and allowing to internalize within us that kills our hope? And as long as hope is there, it's a positive expression of the self within. We will seek help and we will make effort again to learn, to grow, and to be the best versions of ourselves.
You've written books about these three very large bodies of knowledge that come out of the Indian tradition: Advaita Vedanta, or the Vedic, you could call it the Vedic philosophies, Ayurveda, and yoga. How might listeners, particularly the Western audience, how might they contextualize the relationship between these three things? Is one thing an umbrella to the others? Are they isolated? Are they interconnected? How might we understand the interrelationship there?
The Indian Hindu Vedic tradition is so old, so complex, so different, yet so interconnected that it is not always easy to provide a sequential relationship. But I would say that Ayurveda is for the commoners, everyone, because it addresses the body. And we all have a body, and we all want to be rid of aches and pains and want to have vitality and energy. And yet, when you go within Ayurveda, it's not just the body, because then you enter the door called the body, but then you see that body is connected to the mind, the soul, and to the divine allness, consciousness. Then we look at yoga, and yoga practices as well as yoga philosophy address the mind. And you think, okay, we're going to go heal the mind, but no. Once again, we have to interact with the body, with the senses, with the intellect, and with the divine allness, the consciousness. Then when we look at Advaita Vedanta, it is purely for the soul, the spirit, to self-realize, self-recognize, self-actualize. And yet, there really cannot be any such lofty journey unless we purify the body, still the mind, clarify the intellect, purify our food. So what I found in common was this holistic integration. And yet, somehow, Baba, my guru and my parampara, my lineage, prepared me to address the body, the mind, and the spirit or consciousness, the self, at different levels. That's why I have different levels of students and different levels of followers. And I cannot market myself well in today's world where people pick up this tiny little thing, like I'm a teacher of mantra, or I'm a teacher of breath, or I'm a teacher of food. And then they have a very clear brand profile. And whereas I'm a teacher of body, but is there really anything called the body without the mind? And is there even the mind without the self? And so I guess I'm the kind of teacher who waits for those students who are ready to discover beyond the silos of information percolating to us from the Vedic tradition to come into a more integrated sphere, which is how the rishis and the rishikas, the men and women, the seers, wanted us to address our being. Yeah.
That's beautiful, Shunya. This idea of stepping away from the silos into the integrated, holistic approach is incredibly powerful. When an individual can make that affiliation or that step, I think it could be really helpful for our listeners, many of whom understand that we work with the various subtle bodies in our healing process, whether it be via energy healing or other holistic methods, as you describe, to hear you speak a little, if you wouldn't mind, to the concepts of vasana and samskara.
In the Vedas, there are two terms introduced: Atma, which is our true being, and it comes from Apanoti Sarvamiti Atma, which means that which is boundless within us. That is our true being, our true nature. And because it's boundless, it cannot be limited by name, gender, form, age, sorrow, or joy. It's boundless. And then there is something bound within us, and that is known as jiva. That is the persona. And what is bound is really only a reflection of that which is boundless. It's like the vast sun gets trapped in the reflection from a pond. And we think that the sun only lives in the pond, but that's only a reflection. The sun is everywhere. So the persona is really the carrying over of reflections, and you could say the reflected intelligence, reflected light, reflected life, reflected consciousness gets bound up, and and becomes or takes on an entity of its own until we know better, until we have jnanam or knowledge to show us that this is no more than a mere reflection. A wave can believe it's an entity and, oh, look at me rise, and oh no, I'm falling. But when the wave realizes its oceanhood, it realizes that it never dies and is never born, but is ever present as an ocean. And even though it is falling, another wave is rising and they're really one. So this recognition happens through knowledge, through Guru Sanidhya, or being in close proximity of the one who knows and can show us that vision. And samskaras are then the conclusions made by the one who is still in autopilot mode, thinking I'm a wave. And those conclusions, those intellectual beliefs, they take on a potency which continues beyond one life story into another and give birth to yet more ignorance, yet more suffering in the next one. And that's why we go from punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, again and again death, again and again birth, and again lying in a mother's womb, then again death, then again birth, and again lying in a mother's womb. We go through this story ad infinitum due to those darn samskaras that say you are bound, number one, that you're impotent, number two, that you are separate from what you call God. And that duality, that separation, until that great cosmos of which we are a part takes on the body of a guru and looks us in the eye and says, you're not a wave. And somehow the wave, after frolicking around over several lifetimes as a wave, oh, look at me, I'm a tidal wave. Oh, look at me, I'm nothing, I'm a tiny wave. After all those ups and downs of the wave ego, somehow when the guru speaks, the wave listens and the wave settles down. The samskaras calm down. And when the samskaras calm down, the samskaras were giving birth to a sense of adequacy or inadequacy, empowerment or weakness, I'm good or I'm bad, those opposites. When the samskaras come down, only the truth remains. And that truth is beyond these dualities. And it happens in a specific lifetime. I really feel that I was really young when Baba started talking to me, but I must have had other previous lifetimes where I might have heard these conversations, but it was in this one that the conversation changed something within, like truly changed something. So the teachers keep teaching, but the students, sometimes one of them amongst thousands listens, and that one becomes free of samskaras. And so they may continue their life, remaining life as dad, mom, banker, lawyer, attorney, podcaster, host, guest. But they know deep inside that this is only a leela, like a drama. It's not my ultimate truth.
You've made it seemingly a real mission to take these ancient teachings, particularly these more philosophical, very deep philosophical teachings from the Vedas, as you were just describing the wave as the ocean, and to take those types of teachings and translate them in a grounded, embodied, modern way. How do you hope to convey that effectively? These traditional teachings, which might be distant to many people, might be foreign to a Western mind, if that's who you happen to be speaking to. How have you found successful ways to ground that message and communicate that message?
First, by not giving up on the message or trying to dilute it or dumb it down or change it into some 10-minute a day practice, morning, evening. Probably being content with fewer students, but more quality students. More than trying to be a mass phenomena as a guru, I just want to be a guru. Some guru means someone who's heavy with the wisdom. These teachings probably were always a bit of an elitist teachings, even in India. Not everybody. I don't think it's a Westerner or Indian thing. I think it's the kind of mind that wants this teaching. So I have lots of Western students too who are really ready for these teachings, and they receive it with the sacrosanctity that I give it, with the reverence that I think they're sacrosanct, and they take it in that way. It appears that I have a mission, and I believed I had a mission for some time ago, but I'm letting you know I have no mission. I just saw through all of that too, and it's like, oh, that's old language in the website. I guess I have no mission. This is my truth, and this is the only way I became sorrow-free. Because leave it to the shadow, leave it to the samskaras, I would never be shadow-free. But when I became uplifted and relaxed and truly enjoying this sojourn through this weird planet where dark and light coexist, it felt like the right thing to do. And then every day, what else do you do when you're stuck on a planet? What do you do? So you get up and you share the knowledge that seems to have given you some relief. So I share Ayurveda for those who are suffering with bodily situations. I can as eloquently talk about constipation and diarrhea as I would about Atma and Jiva. And I managed to do that because that's how you can help somebody. Then when it comes to yoga, then my source book is the Bhagavad Gita, and I teach the various yogas from the Bhagavad Gita. And then sometimes, and on select occasions with select people, such as yourself or some select students, I get the opportunity to discuss the ultimate truth where nothing else matters. If body has cancer, it doesn't matter. If the mind has some negative tendencies, it doesn't matter, because we are touching something that is beyond body and mind. And when we touch that, we become aware of that, we become so fulfilled and so empty at the same time that it's all okay.
You've said previously that possessing health is a matter of mastering a spiritual art. That if we wish to have health, we must learn all about cultivating health. And this biggest misconception, as you've described it, is health is a fixed commodity. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit to this.
Yeah, I found when I started talking about Ayurveda as if, people have this sequential history of the challenges and blights on their body being. And then they think like it's something that they are losing. And what I found was that health is a spiritual ingredient, so to say, and that we can begin enjoying it even at a late stage of life. I have personally counseled people who were given a terminal diagnosis. I challenged it, saying that you won't live a day less or a day more than what was allocated to you in this divine universe. So forget everything and just start leading your life based on nature's principles as encoded in Ayurveda. And they did it, and they're alive till today. So I myself have a so-called genetic disorder, because of which people with my so-called condition are in wheelchairs or have had multiple surgeries. And I too have had episodes of flare-up where I had to use a crutch or a wheelchair to get about. But I challenged that internally as a spirit being. And I said, okay, so that's my challenge, which energetically you can understand, both of you, that it was an energetic imbalance for me. So I just gave my body mind what it needed. It was a lot of TLC from an energetic perspective. And I am walking, I am running. I have not been back on those crutches or wheelchairs for decades, and I don't plan to go there. So probably if they dig into my genes, they'll find something and say, yeah, you have a condition. But the condition is superfluous to my being, and my being is healthy. So if I can connect to my being, the condition becomes superfluous. It's a memory of my ego that I have this condition. But every day, when several times of the day I go beyond the ego to remember my true being, my ego envelope's pretty light, and it definitely does not carry a genetic disorder in it. So it's been working great for me. Then when I opened my school, and I had a vigorous Ayurveda program, and then I started no-cost clinic where I removed even Ayurvedic medicine, only advice, spiritual plus lifestyle advice to change the energetics of your whole being. And I said, let me experiment. If what has worked for me has worked for everyone. And it did. For 14 plus years, I helped countless people recover from asthma or eczema or breast cancer or fibromyalgia, just through intentioning and energetic changes through food and lifestyle, connecting with the sun, moon, and earth. And so that became the impetus to write Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom. And even the book itself is kind of a transmission, because I get emails from all around the world of people saying that they read the book and they started just living according to it, and voila, their symptoms have abated or they've seen more health than ever before. So I'm not there yet, but I really am tethering on discovering a healing system based on self-recognition as a spirit being, kinship with sun, moon, earth, and some energetic understanding of food and massage and things like that with Ayurveda. Minimal, some certain biocircadian rhythms. If I have the time this time around on earth, I'm going to write another book.
Excellent. I'd love to dive into Ayurveda a little bit more. I was just listening the other day to somebody talk about nutritional psychology, the emerging field of nutritional psychology. And I went, you mean like how food affects not only your body, but your mind? And I thought it was very funny, given an understanding of Ayurveda and other holistic medicinal systems. So it seems like we're coming around full circle. I mean, we're talking thousands of years here to the modern and the ancient being fused. And Ayurveda is really one of those places that something like nutritional psychology, I mean, what a reference book to just send that practitioner to an Ayurvedic book like yours, right? And say, hey, look, this has been around for a long time. I was just wondering about this connection between the foods we eat and our psyche, our mind, and a general overview about that from an Ayurvedic perspective, and in particular, this word sattvic. Is it as simple as we want to move towards a sattvic diet, a sattvic beingness holistically? Is that the directionality of health in Ayurveda, or is it more complex than that?
So I'm remembering this quote from the Gita, which says, Annam hi saumya manaha. Annam means food. Saumya means subtle. And manaha means mind. So they are saying this gross food that you're eating is going to subtly become your mind. It's going to influence your emotions, your thoughts, your ability, your cognitive abilities, your memory, impair it or improve it, etc. And then there is this whole discussion on how we should eat, what we should not eat, what is the approach towards meal times, cooking, choice of food, ingredients, spices. And there's a whole world there. I definitely feel that sattvic, the word sattvic comes from the root word sat. And sat literally means that which is eternal, that which is true being, true existence. It is not ephemeral, it is not temporary, it doesn't come and go. It is the ultimate truth. And so sattvic is whatever food choices or the way we cook or the way we consume the food, chanting mantras, etc., or by sharing the food, what attitudes we bring to the food, whatever makes it more sattvic means it's going to take us towards sat, towards our spirit, and less towards the material nightmare that our body being gets caught up in. I definitely feel that sattvic food or a sattvic revolution is needed because that includes then non-cruelty to animals. That includes non-hoarding, and that includes generosity and feeding the hungry. That includes eating mindfully, chewing mindfully, preparing mindfully, maybe even growing our foods. And then that connects us to the important issue of climate change and honoring earth and not disturbing her. So I feel that sattva can be, I think, if a good word or a good blanket term to move towards, because it invites us to be, in modern terminology, mindful of every aspect of our eating and eliminating, because we can eat really good stuff, but if we don't eliminate it properly or inadequately, we are still becoming toxic. So in Ayurveda, in, ingestion of food and elimination of food are two sides of a coin. And I like that term, nutritional psychology. I really feel that Westerners come up with really good blanket terms and packaging of ancient concepts, but it's really smart, I think. Yeah.
It's fascinating here, Shunya, to feel into and really connect to these ideas you're presenting, really of the importance of impressions, influence energetically through the sun, the water, the moon, through our association with others, our behavior with others, through our food, through the intake of what we might refer to as entertainment, what we're reading, what we're viewing, and how that all has a energetic imprint, effect, and consequence on how we're then embodying this relationship between the spirit and how we're embodying that consequence, as it were.
And, it may seem very complex, but as living creatures, just like the daffodils that are blooming in my garden right now, it's spring here in California, where I live. Just like they have an inherent relationship with the sun, moon, and Mother Earth, so do we. And returning to these inherent kinships is so easy. And it's inbuilt in the Vedic way of life, which begins with waking up in the morning and thanking Mother Earth when we put our first step on it. And then walking out and looking at the rising sun and thanking it for illuminating our life and our hearts. And every full moon, walking out and meditating under it. And when in stress, lying on earth horizontal and allowing the grass and other things on earth to enter your nostrils. To smell earth is very important. When we are stressed, like our mind needs grounding. So these recommendations can be bullet points or to-do lists. But when I think of it poetically, I feel like I like this life.
Your latest book is Raw Like a Goddess. And I wonder sort of why at this time why focus on women? Why is that potentially important now? And in relationship to that, what's the sort of differences here, or are the differences in what might be deemed as feminine spirituality versus masculine spirituality?
Yeah, I didn't plan on writing Roar Like a Goddess. I was actually writing a book on Ayurveda psychology, and quite a scholarly book, which I don't know when I will complete. And suddenly I had this urge, and I had to start a new page on the laptop, and I finished this book in 4 months. And this was Navaratri, the 9 days of the goddess. The festival was going on. So I had been praying to her and meditating her. And boom, this book came out, and my publishers loved it, and it's done really well. So I didn't first pre-plan it. And the divine is not feminine or masculine. It actually transcends gender. But the divine feminine or the feminine divine is one way, an inclusive way that Hinduism and the Vedas see God as. So we actually see the divinity in divine masculine, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, in divine feminine, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, and her thousands of forms. And we see the divine in bulls and cows and horses and elephants and plants and snakes and lizards. And we have the ultimate avatar of God in the form of a boar, in the form of a turtle. But these are not many gods. This is that one truth emerging in all these forms. So, because I'm a woman, because I've had my own challenges being a woman in the 21st century on Earth, which is still not as progressive in its thinking as it should be towards all genders, probably I became an instrument to talk about how we can use these Devi or goddess archetypes to give ourselves permission. I felt like I'm already roaring like a goddess. So I was not teaching myself anything. It was again like another share. And then, it was easy to build into it the colonial interpretations and the patriarchal interpretations. And then I just did some research on other religions also to ensure that it's a little more all-rounded book. Once you start writing, you get to a stage where you're also looking at what's going on about this issue. And I was like, Shunya, you just suddenly landed yourself in feminist space, anti-patriarchal space. What's going on with you? And I had no contacts in this world. And yet this book was birthed by me. I own it, and I feel like it's changed so many lives. And so I remain open to these kind of cosmic, occurrences that happen through me, because in the process, I could go back and publicly talk about my former marriage, how it fell apart, how I disowned myself briefly, and then how I roared with self-owning. And it was especially pertinent because I'm an Acharya and I'm supposed to have it all together, monogamy and everything all put together in a perfect soup, And instead, here I was, didn't have it all together, and so it was just perfect. It was a perfect way to talk about that stuff too, which makes me a more relatable teacher for a lot of my students and readers.
Would you mind going through some of these Devic archetypes, the three that you kind of use as lenses for the book, Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati?
Yeah. They are all manifestations of the one truth and Shakti. And Durga represents raw power. In fact, in our legends, in our holy books, it is mentioned that all the gods get power from her. So she doesn't have power, she is power. And so I like the fact that power or Shakti has been ascribed to the feminine gender in the Vedas. I like that. And she can be channeled by us if we've had, systemic abuse, powerlessness. Our power is abused, it's been taken away from us, so we don't know what it feels like. Then the Durga archetype and her legends and her stories that I discuss really evoke the power, because a lot of the time we are, and it's not just for females, but for men too. Anybody who has been systematically deprived of their power or they have forgotten their power, reading about the Durga archetype, chanting her mantra, and going through her legends is going to make them roar with power. And maybe with that power, they'll become a little unpleasant for the people who kind of had them, subdued enough. But right into that, we come into Lakshmi's archetype. She's all about pleasantness and positivity and sweetness and cheerfulness. And she talks about putting power towards dharma, towards what is righteous, not just for you, but for all beings. So Durga is the goddess of power, but we find in her legends that she never used it for cruelty or for practicing anything less than the most optimum behaviors, And Lakshmi reinforces that. She's the goddess who roars with pleasure and sexuality and beauty and art and ornamentation. And so when we come to the Lakshmi archetype, we talk about how we can use some of that power to feel good about ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to nurture ourselves, to pamper ourselves. And it's very shocking for a lot of Hindus when they come across my book and they go, we didn't know that goddess Lakshmi had a couple of partners before she settled down with Vishnu. It's like, yeah, that's the dogma. Every time you see Vishnu, the male god, you see Lakshmi smiling beatifically next to him, but she chose him after going through some unworthy partners. And I wanted to illustrate that part of the mythology, that probably she's roaring with pleasure because she did not settle down in a codependent, dysfunctional relationship. She actually dared to fulfill her deepest desire to be happy by finding a partner worthy of her. And so readers love this permission from Lakshmi. And now that we are purring with pleasure, how about some knowledge and wisdom and meditation? And that's where Saraswati comes in. Because it's not, okay, you got power now and you have a happy, progressive, beautiful, pleasureful life, but now what? Maybe it's time to discover who you really are. And is the goddess outside you, around you, or inside you? And how do you activate that? Greater consciousness. And I come into a little more Advaita Vedanta at this level, where we go into Saraswati archetype. And because Saraswati has also been described as a river, I talk about finding that inner flow within us. And how can we truly flow? And Baba had told me that when the river flows, it doesn't leave a drop of itself behind. No matter if the drop is murky or it has fungi in it or whatever, it carries all of itself. So then I connected it to trauma and how, we leave bits and pieces of ourselves behind, banished from our consciousness. And I had done that. Despite everything, I had done that briefly when I had left behind the divorced and shamed woman. But then I brought her back on the public stage and in the world to celebrate her. And I remember crying as I wrote this, but I really wanted to flow like the river Saraswati and leave no part of myself behind. The learning parts, the crazy parts, the cuckoo parts, the shamed parts, the foolish parts, the downright dumb parts. All of them are welcome. And it's in this organic wholeness that we can move towards integration, inner integration, and divine alignment. So there's a lot of psychological work going on throughout the book. I don't, to the disappointment of some people, I don't talk about how to worship them because I grew up worshiping them, but I always wanted to be the goddess. And I don't want to be the goddess simply by dressing up like a goddess. I want to think like a goddess. I want to mate like a goddess. I want to eat like a goddess. I want to take decisions like a goddess. And so I guess this book takes that desire to channel the goddess beyond the tiaras and the crowns and the pretty things that we do in the goddess culture into truly roaring, or the roar is connected to owning our true voice. And so roar like a goddess came to be. And I personally think it was a prasad or a gift from the Divine Mother to me during Navratri. And it has helped, I don't know, countless women across the globe. And I get letters every day from far off nations saying how it helped them have a conversation with their boss or their dysfunctional partner or their angry mother or their sarcastic mother-in-law. And even men are reading it to support the women in their life and to support themselves, because the goddess lives in each one of us.
You spoke several times throughout this conversation about this materialistic nightmare in which we often find ourselves entangled. And I wonder, for those listeners who are new to this world, the world of Vedic knowledge, yoga, your teachings, for those who are caught in the wheels of suffering, as it were, who may be finding themselves challenged by their day-to-day existence, just as a very broad question, as we're bringing things to a close here, what you might choose to share with them.
It's a nightmare because something out in the material world is that you're never satisfied with what you get. If you get what you want, you are left with wanting more of it. And when you have it, you have to work very hard to maintain it. And no matter how hard you work to maintain it, be it a relationship or a thing, you sooner or later lose it. Everything is impermanent. And every act of possession or fruition or completion comes with this hidden discharge. And there is loss or grief or fear of loss inbuilt into it. When we see through this delusion that a soulmate will complete me, a bigger house in a better neighborhood will complete me, a bigger car and a good insurance will complete me, a girls' night out will complete me, shopping in the topmost stores in New York will complete me, we still come back home and we're empty. And this is not the fun, and this is not the shunya emptiness. This is the kind of emptiness which makes us loathe living. When we are in that space where no matter what we accumulate and what we possess leaves us bereft and empty at an emotional, spiritual level, that is when there is no out. And then begins the real journey to look for something wholesome within, and we find it everywhere. The Vedic world, the Vedic wisdom is not pessimistic, but it begins probably with a discourse with those who've already become disillusioned. If someone thinks that they can go shopping at the Macy's clearance and feel good, they're not my students. But those who've shopped all they wanted and they're done, they are my students. They get ready to say, what else is there that I need not possess? In fact, I can let go and I'll be okay. I can give up and I'll be okay. It can be taken away from me and I'll be okay. What is that okayness? Show me the way. And that is the Vedic way.
You're describing how so often, or maybe it almost seems like all of the time, that what is required for people to look within and really make those inner changes, those fundamental changes about their relationship to living in life, is that they suffer enough to realize they're doing it all wrong. And we often talk about the difference between how an individual changes versus the collective changes, and hold paramount to change as one needs to be responsible for themselves. One needs to be willing to do the hard work within themselves in order to effectuate change outside. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are in this relationship between personal versus collective change. And if the personal has to reflect the collective, does it just mean that as a world, as a civilization, as a planet, that we have to suffer enough until we wake up collectively, or could it look different?
That's a very profound question. I think suffering does play a role in individual awakening or the desire to awaken. Pleasure kind of keeps us seduced in looking for more pleasure. So suffering is more useful. In fact, teachers like myself, we really savor when suffering comes our way. We milk it because we know we're going to grow even more from it. But sadly, collectively too, at a human level, suffering seems to be important. But again, the Vedas don't give a simplistic answer. They talk about yugas or epochs or cycles of when, for example, in Satyuga, one need not suffer. A lot of the people were enlightened because the cosmos was working with us to be enlightened. And now that we are in the fourth stage, Kali Yuga, suffering, death, cruelty, lack of dharma, this is the way. And we'll really have to go into the darkness to emerge again. But let's juxtapose the individual with the collective journey. When I look at my own journey or my students' journey or my readers' journey, I think, you know what? Let me support the individual. The collective may be going crazy, but there is still room for individual awakening. And the more individuals can awaken from this material nightmare of grabbing, grasping, cruelty, and relax into inner peace, the more we can bring in the next yuga or the next epoch of peace. So the work at individual level is harder here. I find that a lot of people are on autopilot mode, simply seeking more physical, material pleasures. And they don't even question who they are, why they are. And even religions and gurus into mass following, sleepwalkers, cults, occurrences are happening. Religions which have fanatical elements are thriving. So it's all happening at a, collective level. So someone like myself asks, and I've had that question, does my voice even matter? It does matter, because I know I have at least a few students who have transformed and juxtaposed, have changed their life. And I think if you change even one person's life, you affect the whole, because there is no individual, there is only the whole. So you've already made a change. So if I'm going to stay asleep, the whole universe may fall asleep. But if I stay awake, I single-handedly prevent the universe from falling asleep. So those people who are awake, our responsibility is more. And it's harder, but it's important.
Those who are interested in pursuing awakening, as it were, for those whom the door has been knocked, and they're looking to further into those more, I hesitate to use the word advanced teachings, but the opportunity within awakening, what might you share with them?
Stay tuned in with your truth and really connect with the cosmos to find you a teacher, good book, a good teacher, and then stick with them. No more window shopping of teachers, and just settle down in any tradition that brings you closer to the divine in a progressive, liberal, open way. And just go deep. Instead of horizontal journeys, go deep and dare to transform yourself. There are a lot of traditions along with the Vedic tradition that can take you deep. And then every tradition takes you so far, and then you're on your own. And that's a very important time where you discover the truths. And so go for it, I would say.
What do you have coming up that you'd like to share with our listeners, and how can they find you?
I have an ongoing program called The Vedic Way, where I meet with students weekly. So if they're interested in studying with me, they can go to my website, which I'm sure you'll post. Apart from that, I have programs coming up at the Shivananda Institute in Bahamas, at the Kripalu Institute of Yoga through summer. So just check out my website, and I'm sure there'll be opportunities to study with me online or in person.
Shunya, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. We urge people to check out your books and go to your site, etc. You have a lot to share, and we just really appreciate your time and your wisdom and your heartfelt, sincere conversation today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the episode. What really supports the podcast is providing a rating and review of the show on your preferred listening platform. This helps us get the message out to a wider audience. If the topics we discussed today appeal to you, do take a moment to subscribe. Lastly, we invite you to check out our website, fielddynamicshealing.com, to learn about our training programs, private session work, and to see how we're setting the standard in contemporary energy healing. Many thanks, and see you next time.